We're on the top of Daf Dalid Omid Beis, and we're interpreting the pasuk according to Rabbi Akiva. And you recall that the pasuk had mentioned that Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai. This is in the end of Parshas Mishpatim. Vaychaseu Hanan Sheishes Yomim. Vayikral Moshe b'Yom Hashvi mitoch Hanan. And the Gemara in the name of Rabbi Akiva says that Vaychaseu Hanan Sheishes Yomim. It doesn't mean that the Hanan covered Moshe Rabbeinu, because in fact, Moshe Rabbeinu during those 6 days at the beginning of Sivan, prior to the Aseret HaDibros, was going up and down. He went up to get a tzivui from Hashem about Shlosh Me'agbola, came down, etc., etc. But rather, kiso means Hanan lahar. Kisa, who refers to the har. Vayikral Moshe, Moshe now, on the 7th day of Sivan, gets the calling from Hashem. And says Rabbi Akiva, it's Moshe v'chol Yisrael omdim. The Kriya of Hashem comes to not only Moshe Rabbeinu, but to the entire community of Israel to come now to hear the Aseret HaDibros to Matan Torah. The reason why it says in the pasuk Vayikral Moshe is to give covet to Moshe Rabbeinu, not to mention Klal Yisrael and include Moshe Rabbeinu swallowed up inside. So it's a special covet that it's the pasuk singles out Moshe, but in truth, that clarion call came to all of Klal Yisrael. It was time for Matan Torah. This is the machlokus between Rabbi Yossi HaGlili and Rabbi Akiva, and these are the questions that were being raised. We can actually summarize a number of distinctions here between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi HaGlili's respective interpretations of this pasuk. Rabbi Yossi HaGlili understands that Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai is a story that takes place on the 7th day of Sivan, after Matan Torah. Matan Torah was on the 6th day of Sivan, according to Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. Vaychasehu Hanan means that the Hanan covered Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayikral Moshe means that Moshe Rabbeinu, you are now ready to come out of your Prisha. And finally, B'Yom HaShvi means on the 13th day of Sivan, now having followed this from the 7th to the 13th of Sivan, you fulfilled your Prisha. Now the voice comes out. It's time to go up to the Mach Shechinah Har Sinai to receive the Luchos HaBris. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, understands that Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai takes place on Rosh Chodesh Sivan before Aseret HaDibros. And Vaychasehu Hanan is referring to the mountain itself that was shrouded, that was covered in the glory of the kavod of the Anan for those 6 days. Vayikral Moshe, and on the 7th day there was a clarion call to Moshe and Klal Yisrael. Moshe is singled out kidei lachol kol kavod, and B'Yom HaShvi is the 7th day of Sivan. That's when the Aseret HaDibros are given. Now the Brisa quotes another opinion, and that is Rabbi Nosson Omer. According to Rabbi Nosson, Sheishes Yomim, these 6 days in the pasuk are after Matan Torah. In that sense, he agrees with Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. Ba kasuv elo l'marek hachilu chesia shebemeov. However, Rabbi Nosson is not willing to agree with Rabbi Yossi HaGlili that these 6 days are days of Prisha, such that we could learn from that a Kohen Gadol, when he goes into the Mach Shechinah on Yom Kippur, he also needs Prisha. But rather, the purpose of those days, of these 6 days, following Matan Torah, before Moshe goes up to Har Sinai, is L'marek Achilu Shesiyah Shebemeov Lasumo Kimalache Hashares. And it means that Moshe Rabbeinu had food and drink in his body and his intestines, and these had to be purged, so to speak. And the reason for that is that Moshe Rabbeinu had to be like an angel. And that's a special halacha that only applies to Moshe Rabbeinu. We could not derive any conclusions from this to the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Rab Masya ben Charash Omer, again agreeing with Rab Yosef HaGlili, these are the 6 days after Matan Torah, and this is not a source, as Rabbi Yosef HaGlili would see, for Prisha of a Kohen Gadol, lo ba kosev elo li'ayim olav. Since Moshe Rabbeinu is going up to receive the luchos, therefore, the purpose of this 6-day period is to instill fear in the heart of Moshe Rabbeinu, so that he could be makabel the Torah, be emo b'yira Torah, Kadeshe Torah nitenes b'ema bereses ubezeya. The Torah should be accepted, received with fear, with trembling, with quaking. Shenemar, a pasuk at the beginning of Sefer Tehillim, Ivdu es Hashem b'yira v'gilu b'rada. My v'gilu b'rada. There's a paradox in the pasuk. The pasuk seems to indicate that you rejoice with trepidation. How do we reconcile that? Amar of Adavar Masam Rav b'Makom Gila Sham Tehei Ra'ada. We're talking about the time of Matan Torah, great time of Simcha, but we require Ra'ada and Charada, and that was the purpose, according to Rav Masya ben Charash, of these 6 days of preach of Moshe Rabbeinu, to put him in a state of reses v'yira for Kabbalah Sator. So again, we see from this long brisa that we just finished that according to Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, we could derive from Moshe Rabbeinu, who is required to do Prisha before he enters into Har Sinai, which is called the Machne Shechina, that likewise a Kohen Gadol has to be porish before he enters into the Kodesh Kodashim on Yom Kippurim. And this is a source for Reish Lakish, that anyone who goes into the Machne Shechina needs Prisha, including the Kohen Gadol, who serves on Yom HaKippur. Again, this price is not as explicit to support Reish Lakish as the previous one to support Rabbi Yochanan. I mean, here we're only focusing on the opinion of Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. What is the source of the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi HaGlili and Rabbi Akiva? How does each one derive his respective shita? B'plukta dahani tanon. It all depends upon the following machlokas tanon. Desanya. According to the first opinion in this brisa, b'shisha b'chodesh nitna Torah li Yisrael. It was on the 6th of Sivan that the Aseres Hadibros were given to Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi Omer b'shiva, but was on the 7th of Sivan. And the Gemara explains. Man Omer according to Tanakama b'shisha b'Sivan. He's of the opinion that on the 6th of Sivan, Nitna, and then on the following day, on the 7th of Sivan, Allah, Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Har Sinai. And Man Omer, but according to Rabbi Yossi, the second opinion, b'shiva, on the 7th day of Sivan, the Torah was given, and b'shiva nitno, b'shiva Allah. On that 7th day, following the Aseres Hadibros, Moshe Rabbeinu climbed up to the mountain to be there for 40 days to receive the Luchos Habris. Tichsiv vayikra el Moshe b'yom hashvi. So everybody agrees in this brisa that on the 7th of Sivan, Moshe Rabbeinu climbs up the mountain. They're only arguing, did he climb up the mountain on the very day that the Torah was given, which is on the 7th day, or maybe it was the day after the Torah was given, and the Torah was in fact given on the 6th day. And now the Gemara is going to show how this machlokas will shed a light on the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi HaGlili and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, Savarla, Tanakam Yomar, Shisha b'chodesh nitna Torah. It was on the 6th of Sivan that the Torah was given. Hilkach, therefore, Rabbi Yossi HaGlili has no choice. But Zerayamaisa, when the Torah describes the episode of the Kisi Ha'anan al-Ahar for Sheshis Yomim, and then Hashem calls out, cries out to Moshe Rabbeinu on the 7th day, that has to be Achar Aseres Hadibros. It's got to be after the Aseres Hadibros, because it cannot be that the Torah was given on the 6th day, and the following day, the 7th day, after the Torah was already given, Hashem calls out to Moshe to receive the Aseres Hadibros. It's already been given on the 6th. And therefore, we have to interpret Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai v'Chaseu Anan Sheishes Yom LeMoshe, that this pasuk describing the cloud is covering Moshe Rabbeinu, and all this is taking place after the Aseres Hadibros. Vayikral Moshe v'Yom HaShvi, and when is the voice of Hashem crying out to Moshe Rabbeinu? And that is after the 6-day period following Aseres Hadibros. On the 7th day, L'Kabule Shar HaTorah, come up to Har Sinai and receive the Luchos HaBris and the balance of the Torah above and beyond the Aseres Hadibros. The Isal Kedaita, if you could interpret Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai as referring to Rosh Chodesh Sivan, like Rabbi Akiva, then V'Chaiseo On Lahar, and you're going to have to say that the kisui of the Anon in preparation, anticipation of Kabbalas Aseres Hadibros was on the mountain. So that means for the 6th day, starting Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Hashem's glory, the cloud of glory covered and descended upon the mountain of Sinai. And then Vayikra Moshe B'Yom HaShvi. And now on the 7th day, the voice comes out to Moshe Rabbeinu, after that meant to all Klal Yisrael, L'Kabuli Aseres Hadibros, HaKabbalah Mishisha, because Rabbi Yossi Haglili is committed to the opinion of the Tanna Kamma of this price, so that the Torah was given on the 6th day. Veha, and furthermore, Istalek Ha'anan Bishisha. How could it be that Moshe Rabbeinu heard the voice of Hashem on the 7th day, Mitoch Anan, when the Anan already left on the 6th day, after the Aseres Hadibros? Therefore, we have no choice but to assume that this pasuk is after Matan Torah, and the Anan covered Moshe Rabbeinu, not the Har, and we're going to derive from this the Halacha Prisha, the 6 days of Prisha before Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to the mountain, to the Machne Shechina. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, Sover Law, to Rabbi Yossi, the Yom B'Shiva B'Chodesh Nitna Torah L'Yisrael. Now everything goes smooth. If the Torah was given on the 7th day, then we certainly have a clear pathway to interpret that Vayikra Moshe B'Yom HaShvi means that the voice came out to Moshe and to Klal Yisrael on the 7th day of Sivan to receive the Aseres Hadibros. So the 6 days that came before the 7th day were days of Kisi Anan al Hahar, not on Moshe, but on the Har. And Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and Vayichaseu Anan Lahar, from Rosh Chodesh Sivan, for the following 6 days, the Anan hovered over the mountain. And Vayikra Moshe and Bnei Yisrael B'Yom HaShvi, that's the 7th day of Sivan, to be Makabel the Aseres Hadibros. We have no source then for the Prisha of Moshe of the Kohen Gadol, for Knisa L'Machne Shechina B'Shlem L'Rabbi Akiva, Haidu the Mishkachas Le Shebeshiva Sar B'Tammuz Nishtabru Al Luchos. The Mishnah says in Tainis that on the 7th day of Tammuz, Moshe Rabbeinu destroyed the Luchos. That works out beautifully. Why? Because Esrim the Arba Sivan. If the Torah was given, the Aseres Hadibros were given on the 7th of Sivan, then the balance of Sivan equals 24. And Shitzar, now we have 6 more days of Tammuz, from the 1st until the 16th of Tammuz, Molulei Arbaim Yom. So we add 24 and 16, we end up with 40. And Havi Bahar, during the 40 days of Moshe Rabbeinu was up on the mountain. Ubishvasar, on the following day, B'Tammuz, Nochis, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain after the 40 days are completed, and he finds the people, etc., and then he breaks the luchos. El Rabbi Yossi Haglili, the whole cheshbon is off. Why? The Amar Shisha, de Prisha, that after Matan Torah, which was given on the 6th, there was another 6 days of Prisha. And then following that, on the 7th day, the voice called out to Moshe Rabbeinu to go up to Mount Har Sinai. So now Moshe Rabbeinu is on Har Sinai 40 days, but we're going to start from day 23 of Sivan. Why? Because we've added, right? Let's make the cheshbon. He says, El Rabbi Yosef Gli di Omar Shisha de Prisha v'arboim dahar is ad esru tlas b'tamuz lo itbar. He's going to add to the 17th of Tammuz another let's say 3 and 3 is 6 is 6 and 17 is 23 is Esrim Tlas. And it was only on the 23rd of Tammuz that Moshe broke the Luchos. Amalach Rabbi Yosef Glila Arboim Dahar Bahari Shisha de Prisha. The 6 days of Prisha, beginning on the 7th of Sivan, are included in the 40 days. So the 40-day period starts ticking with Moshe Rabbeinu's Prisha, which took place on the 7th of Sivan. Amar Mar, we have the Brisa quoting Rabbi Akiva Yikra Moshe Bayom HaShvi, and we said that on the 7th day, which is the 7th of Sivan, the day of Aseret Dibros, Moshe v'chol Yisrael omdim, the voice of Hashem cried out to not just Moshe Rabbeinu, but the entire people. And we only mentioned Moshe in the pasuk Lachlok lo kovid. Misayele Rabbi Lazar, Diom Rabbi Lazar, support from Lazar, Vayikra El Moshe. Moshe v'chol Yisrael omdim. Lo ba'akasav el lachlok lo kovid lo Moshe. Fine, that's what we said before. Basically, we have a kasha now on the Brisa. The pasuk says in Bamidbar Zayin, I'll read the entire pasuk. Ubevo Moshe el Ol Moed l'taber ito v'yishma es kol medaber elov me'al ha'kapores asher al Aron ha'idus mibein shnei hakruvim v'yidaber elov. Now, it could have said in the pasuk v'yishma es kol hakol midaber lo, or lo. What is elov? Kol elov. And the implication is that Moshe shama v'kol Yisrael lo shama. That when the voice came down to the Ol Moed in the Mishkan, Moshe heard the voice, Klal Yisrael didn't hear the voice. And this is an objection to our brisa, the previous brisa, that Moshe and Kol Yisrael amdu, and everybody heard the kriya, the voice of Hashem. Lo kasha, ha b'sinai, ha b'ol moed. First answer to the Gemara is that the earlier brisa, that all of Bnei Yisrael heard the kriya, that was at Har Sinai. And vayishkan kvod Hashem al Har Sinai v'yichaseu ana vayikra Moshe, that's a reference to all of Klal Yisrael. But the pasuk that's mentioned in the second brisa, that starts with Bo Moshe Ol Moed. This is already at the time of the Mishkan, and the kol was heard on top of the Aron Me'al HaKapores, and only Moshe Rabbeinu heard the kol Hashem, and that's why it says Medaber Elov. Iboy same another answer, Lo Kasha, Ha B'Kriya, Ha B'Dibur. What we learned in the first brisa, that even Klal Yisrael heard the Kriya, that's Kriya. That means that the Torah is talking about Vayikra. But in the second brisa, there the pasuk says Vayidaber. Right? It says Vayishmas Hakol Midaber Elov. That's already Dibur. And the language of Dibur is indicative of a private kind of speech, a private discussion between one person and another. That's called Dibur. And in this context, it means that Moshe Rabbeinu heard the Dibur and not Klal Yisrael. And he writes here in the name of Rabbeinu El Yakim and the Ritva she'es hakriya leMoshe shamu, ve'ilu es hadibur elov lo shamu. Rabbi Zrika Rami Kroy. Rabbi Zrika finds a contradiction in two sukkim, and he presents it kame in the front of Rabbi Elazar. The Ami others say it was Rabbi Zrika, and Rabbi Elazar was the one who asked this stira. Ksiv, one pasuk says, and this is later on in Sefer Shmos, in Parshas Ki Tisa, it says, "V'lo yachol Moshe lovel ol moed ki shachen alav b'hanan." And it seems that the Anan, the cloud of glory, was a barrier that prevented Moshe from entering into the old Moed. But yet, with regard to our Sinai Ksiv, vayavo Moshe b'tolcha Anan. So it seems that Moshe Rabbeinu had no problem. There was no ma'akev here. He went straight into the Anan. Malami shetovsa kodesh baruch hu leMoshe beviu b'Anan. So what is it? Is it the Shechina preventing Moshe Rabbeinu from going in, or on the contrary, the Shechina pulls Moshe Rabbeinu in? And to Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, and they give really the answer to this question, because Nemar Kan Bitoch, it says Vayovo, this is at the end of Parashat Mishpat, Vayovo Moshe Bitoch Anan, the Nemar Ladlon in Kriyas Yamsuf. In Parshas B'Shalach it says Bitoch, the same word Bitoch Vayovo Bnei Yisrael Bitoch Hayam, Mal Halon Shvil. There was a row that was opened, splitting the sea. Tichsiv, as it says, "Vayavo bnei Yisrael b'toch hayam v'yabashava mayim lehem choma miminam b'Yisrael." Amafkan, here too, with regard to Moshe Shvil, there was also in the Anan some sort of an opening pathway, and Moshe Rabbeinu was able to go into that path. Here's another drasha on this pasuk, or relevant to this pasuk, of Vayikra El Moshe. At the very beginning of Sefer Vayikra, Vayikra El Moshe Vayidaber, etc. So it's very strange. The pasuk opens with the word Vayikra and continues with Vayidaber. Lama hiktim kriya ledibur. Limda tar derech eretz shelo yomar adam davar lechaveru elim kain koreh. That before you start speaking to someone, don't just start speaking to him, but rather call upon him. That's derech eretz. First, you begin by calling. Misayele Rab Chanina dom Rab Chanina lo yomar adam davar lechaveru elim kain koreh. First, he has to call to him. Call him out by name. Then the pasuk says, in that pasuk, Vayikra El Moshe, and then it says, Vayidaber Hashem Elav Me'ol Moed Lema. Amar Rav Musia bar Rei de Rab Masya Mishmei de Rabbi Musia Rabba Minayin LaOmer Davar LeChavero Shehu Bebal Yomar. That if somebody tells you something, the implication is that you don't share it with others. You don't reveal secrets and pass it on to others. Ad sheyomalo, until he says to him, Lech emar, go tell it to others. So the word lemar means not to tell it to others. Shenemar vaydaber Hashem elav me'oel moed lemar. And we're going to read the word lemar as if it says lo emar. Don't tell it to anyone else. But again, this only applies to something that has a certain sensitivity, a privacy to it. Now the Gemara goes back to the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. From whence do we derive Prishas Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur? Rabbi Yochanan derived it from Miluim, Reish Lakish from Sinai. And we found that Reish Lakish raised the objection to Rabbi Yochanan from the fact that Prishas Kohen Gadol, if you learn it from Miluim, it should be Me'akev, because anything that was given as the command of Miluim is Ma'akev. So Gemara's Medayik Michlal, the Travayus Svirle, even Rabbi Yochanan agrees to this very basic premise and principle that in regard to Miluim, Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem. And how do I know that even Rabbi Yochanan agrees that Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem? De'itma, we learned the following, that with regard to Miluim, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina had a machlokas. Chad Omar Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem, v'chad Omar Dovar Hama'akiv L'Doros Miyakev B'hem, but she'ein Ma'akiv L'Doros ein Miyakev B'hem. So not everything that was given in the command at the time of the Miluim, according to Rabbi Chanina, is Likuva. Only that which in general for the Avoda in the Beis HaMikdash, Lidoros, is Likuva. That's what's Likuva. Now we're not sure who says what, but Tistayim to Rabbi Yochanan, who the Omar Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem, that in this machlokas, it's Rabbi Yochanan who took the position that any command that was given in the Miluim is critical. From the fact that Rav Shimon Lokish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Imam Miluim Kol HaKosav Miyakev B'hem. So now we should say that Prisha is Miyakev. And Rabbi Yochanan did not respond to Reish Lakish and deny this principle of Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem. So it seems, to Stayim, we could certainly conclude that Rabbi Yochanan agreed to that basic principle, that Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem. You want to ask my Binai, what's the difference whether it's Rabbi Yochanan's Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem or Rabbi Chanina? It's only that which is Miyakev L'Doros. And here we turn to Daf Hey Amud Aleph. And the Gemara now is going to bring a whole list of dinim that were mentioned in Miluim, but L'Doros they're not Ma'akev. Rav Yosef, Smicha Ika Beinai. The Nafkamina is going to be the mitzvah of Smicha. L'man Diyom, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem Smicha Miyakva. And when a person brings a carbon, he's somech yadav ala carbon before the shechita, and that applies to a carbon ola, to a carbon asham, to a carbon shlamim. To a carbon ola, carbon asham, a carbon chatas, and you require smicha. With regard to miluim, there was a parla chatas, there was shnei elim liola, there was shlamim, and Aaron was called upon to be somech yadav before the shechita, as it says in Shmos Chav Tes, v'kravta es hapar lifnei olmoi v'samach Aaron ubodav es yadeim al rosh hapar. So smicha is mentioned here in Miluim, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, certainly smicha would be miyakev, because kol HaKosav B'hem Miyakev B'hem. However, l'man diyom, according to Rabbi Chanina, davar she'ein miyakev l'doros ein miyakev and smicha lo ma'akva. We know that a carbon is machaper and it's ola l'bailim, even in the absence of smicha. Smicha is a mitzvah, but not critical. And the Gemara now, which we'll Hashem cover tomorrow, is going to ask, how do we know that smicha is not critical lidoros? This is where we'll stop here on the top of Daf Hey Amud Aleph.